Mrs. Paula Blake Powell, Ambassador Marjorie Taylor, Permanent Secretaries, Director of Public Prosecutions, Ms. Paula Llewellyn, Contractor General, Mr. Dirk Harrison, Deputy Commissioner of Police, Mr. Dillsworth Heath, and Senior Superintendent of Police, Mr. Bertrand O'Connor, representing Commissioner of Police, Mr. Owen Ellington, Commissioner of Corrections, Ms. Javine Bent, Custis of St. Andrew, the Honorable Marigold Harding, Custis of Kingston, the Honorable Mr. Stedman Fuller, UNICEF Country Representative, Mr. Mark Connolly, heads of agencies, ladies and gentlemen, children, good morning. Good morning, I'm Nicole Hales, Manager for Public Education and Special Projects at the Office of the Children's Advocate, and I'll be your chairperson for today's event. We are pleased that you've taken the time out of your busy schedules to be with us as we launch our Child Justice Guidelines. These guidelines are a piece of pioneering work, and we are very proud of them at the Office of the Children's Advocate, as they are the first in the Caribbean and the Latin America. Through the development of these guidelines, we are confident that it will serve to make the experience of our children who interface with the court system as well as the justice system overall a more positive one, because we believe that we must at all times put the best interests of our children at the fore. At this time, we'd like to acknowledge the presence of the French ambassador who just joined us. We will proceed to the greeting section of our program. We will take the greetings in the order that they are indicated in your programs. However, I ask for your indulgence, and we will first take greetings from the Minister of National Security, the Honorable Mr. Peter Bunting, as he has a prior commitment to which he must attend. So we will take his greeting, and then we continue with the orders of the greetings as indicated in your programs. Minister Bunting.
Thank you very much, Madam Master of Ceremonies. Children's Advocate, Mrs. Diane Gordon Harrison, Ms. Palmer, representing the Minister of Justice, other members of government, members of the Diplomatic Corps, other distinguished commissions of Parliament here represented, the Contractor General. I don't believe the Director of Public Prosecutions. I've seen her, Madam Costas, other distinguished guests, ladies and gentlemen. As the MC briefly alluded to, I wasn't actually scheduled to be here this morning. I'm actually scheduled to be on a flight out of Jamaica, but because of some adjustments in the schedule, I was able to give 45 minutes. I had promised the Children's Advocate to come at the last minute, and I'm happy to be accommodated, because I really made that effort because I feel it is very important that I associate the Ministry of National Security and the government more broadly with this launch of the Child Justice Guidelines. This is not something that is only of passing interest to us. It is critical that two departments in particular, the Police Department and the Corrections Department of the Ministry, not just observe and be aware of these guidelines, but indeed incorporate them into our very administrative procedures, into the force orders for the police force, into the policy guidelines and standard operating procedures for the Corrections Department. Child justice, and indeed the wider area of child care and protection, requires, probably more so than any other task, the involvement and vigilance of the entire society. The Child Care and Protection Act, Section 6, in fact, obliges anyone who suspects that a child is being abused or neglected to make a report to the Office of the Children's Registry or the police department, which is probably more accessible across Jamaica. And I have myself been surprised that even as a member of parliament or as minister, I've had occasions to hear of teachers who, during the course of interacting with children at school, suspect that they're being abused at home by a parent. And instead of making that report to the police or to the Office of the Children's Registry, they call in the other parent. And this is not in keeping with the law. It's not in keeping with best practice. And it is something that we probably need to do more public education around, because I was surprised that a teacher in particular who has added the responsibility under the Child Care and Protection Act, other, beyond what just a neighbor or someone in the community would have, would not be aware that that's a responsibility. But it's part of the culture of our society to keep these things, if they're happening within our family, and probably not just of our societies, probably the culture generally, to tend to want to keep these family issues hidden. But that is not what the law requires, and that is not what is correct and the right thing to do. In fact, all the studies show that children who are traumatized and abused are likely to perpetuate that cycle of trauma and abuse. And many of the children and youth that end up interfacing with the departments of my ministry, whether the police department or the correctional service, in fact, really represent failed outcomes or outcomes of failures or weaknesses at many levels of society, at the family level, at the school, social work, public health. And if we keep trying to address these issues just at the control end, which is once they're already engaging with the justice system or the correctional system, then we're going to have a perpetual supply of recruits to gangs and to criminal activities. So therefore, it's absolutely critical and not incidental to the work of the Ministry of National Security that the work of the Office of the Children's Advocate be supported by the entire, reversing the unenviable reputation and reality we have for violence in the society. And it has to start with addressing violence or abuse or neglect against our children. So in closing, let me really use this opportunity to commend the approach of the Office of the Children's Advocate. I think it is really one of the commissions of Parliament that I think stands out in terms of their success. They are results-oriented, not PR-oriented. They take a cooperative rather than a confrontational approach with other departments and agencies. They hold themselves jointly accountable for the results rather than just to participate in a blame game. And of course, they're fiercely independent and competent. not subject to pressure from government or non-government organizations in terms of their decisions and their timetables, but entirely concerned with the interests of our children and in the interest of what is workable and pragmatic. So with those remarks, once again, I thank you for accommodating me, and I want to associate the Ministry of National Security and its agencies, in particular the police and correctional departments, with the endorsement of these guidelines and to give our commitment to integrate them into our operations. Thank you.
Children's Advocate of Jamaica and event host, Mrs. Diane Gordon, Secretary in the Ministry of Justice, Mrs. Carla Camo, representing the Ministry of Justice, Senator the Honorable Mark Golding. Legal Officer in the Ministry of Health, Ms. Stacey Ann Joseph, representing Minister of Health, the Honorable Dr. Fenton Ferguson. Members of the Diplomatic Corps, Family Court Judge, Her Honorable Mrs. Paula Blake Powell, Ambassador Marjorie Taylor, Permanent Secretaries, Director of Public Prosecutions, Ms. Paula Llewellyn, Contractor General, Mr. Dirk Harrison, Deputy Commissioner of Police, Mr. Dilsworth Heath, and Senior Superintendent of Police, Mr. Bertram O'Connor, representing the Commissioner of Police, Mr. Owen Ellington, Commissioner of Corrections, Ms. Javine Bent, Custos of St. Andrew, the Honorable Marigold Harding, Custos of Kingston, the Honorable Stedman Fuller, UNICEF Country Representative, Mr. Mark Connolly, heads of agencies, ladies and gentlemen, children, good morning. And share in this launch of the Office of the Children's Advocate Child Justice Guidelines. This is a special day, and as Universal Children's Day, this is a fitting ceremony to commemorate I am truly grateful to be a part of this launch, and the other members of the advisory panel, I am sure, are happy to be here too. The Office of the Children's Advocate gives us the opportunity to exercise our participatory rights. We have the opportunity to come and to inform them about things that are affecting us as children. It doesn't prevent us, or it creates this feeling or excited about what this document will do for our children, as we are children ourselves, and we are just very grateful to the office and to everyone who believes that children are of such importance and that they should be involved in the nation's building of policies and legislation. Thank you. Your presence here today serves as a reminder that you value and hold in high esteem the responsibility you have as justice ambassadors, and that you are in accordance with the Office of the Children's Advocate, that the rights of children are to be maintained within the justice system. We as children do get in trouble at times, and though there are sanctions for misconduct, there is no way any law enforcer, or anyone for that matter, has the right to abuse or neglect the rights we have as children. The Office of the Children's Advocate welcomes you to this ceremony, that you will just celebrate with us and just be a part of it and just let it flow as it's supposed to be, and don't let it be just a piece of theoretical work, We want it to be tangible. We want to see it manifested in this society. And with the help of everyone here and the nation at large, it will be successful. We are committed to the improvement of the quality of life we experience as children, and irregardless of social background, creed, or circumstance, we have rights and they must be observed. On behalf of the Office of the Children's Advocate and the advisory panel, accept warm greetings. We trust that you will enjoy the rest of the day. Thank you.
This moment, we'll ask Mr. Justice Henderson Downer to come forward and deliver the greetings on behalf of the Chief Justice of Jamaica, the Honorable Mrs. Zayla McCullough, who could not be here.
I think you will pardon me if I dispense with repeating what has just been so brilliantly done on 2 occasions, the list of guests, and I will just say honored guests, and proceed to do what I am assigned to do. I must say that it gives me pleasure to be reading this message on behalf of the Chief Justice, because the happiest 5 years of my life so far was spent as a judge of the Supreme Court. So, here is a message. I am pleased to have been asked to give greetings at today's official launch of the Office of the Children's Advocate Child Justice Guidelines. I fully endorse the compilation and the publication of these guidelines. I feel privileged to have been associated with this project throughout the entire process. I applaud the Office of the Children's Advocate for its continuing efforts to fulfill its mandate regarding the protection of children's rights and the work being done in this vital area. There continues to be a pressing need to address challenges being faced by our children who come in contact with the justice system. The launch of these guidelines is testimony to the broad scope of the work that the Office of the Children's Advocate continues to undertake and execute. I believe that this publication is the first of its kind in the Caribbean and will contribute to the improvement of child's justice in Jamaica. We can all be justly proud of this accomplishment. Since taking office as Chief Justice, I have worked assiduously and closely with a wide cross-section of stakeholders, both locally and internationally, to conduct sensitization sessions for judges and resident magistrates in order to foster a child-friendly justice system within our legal framework. On September the 17th, 2013, I convened a Chief Justice Stakeholders Forum which had at its main focus the treatment of children in the justice system. The forum included participants drawn from various groups which have the responsibility to deal with issues relating to such children. Various presenters, including the Children's Advocate, Ms. Diane Harrison, had the opportunity to interface with the resident magistrates from the entire island on issues impacting children. Fruitful discussions were held at this forum, and recommendations were made as to the way forward. The establishment of these procedural guidelines is most timely, as they place the rules and best practices that ought to govern how we treat our children as the cornerstone of the process. International convention and best practices require that Jamaica's priorities the establishment of laws, procedures, and institutions that respect the rights of children that interact with the justice system in any capacity. Although as a nation we have achieved much in areas that seek to safeguard the rights and best interests of our children, we must be mindful that we're living in a changing and dynamic society. We must therefore be receptive and ready to adapt to these changes in systems and policies. we must always be vigilant in safeguarding the rights of our children. The establishment of these child justice guidelines is therefore timely and necessary as Jamaica moves towards realizing Vision 2030. These guidelines should serve as the catalyst for paving a path in the dispensation of justice in order to ensure that the best interests of children are observed at all times. I pledge my continued support in ensuring that our judges and magistrates are sensitized to these guidelines, as the creation of a child-friendly environment for children who come in contact with the justice system must be seen as a priority. In closing, I wish to leave you with the words of a former president of South Africa, the Nobel Prize laureate, Nelson Mandela. There is no keener revelation of a society's soul than the way in which it treats its children. Ladies and gentlemen, I endorse and commend the work accomplished by the Office of the Children's Advocate in collaboration with other stakeholders, and wish you a successful launch. Thank you.
Thank you, Justice Downer, for delivering the message on behalf of Mr. Connolly. We will now take greetings from Mr. Mark Collinley, UNICEF Country Representative. At the Office of the Children's Advocate, we must say we are pleased to have gotten the support, the funding support needed to produce these guidelines from UNICEF, and they continue to be a key partner for us. Mr. Connolly?
I also think it is a real honor and privilege to be here with you all today, for all of us to be here today, celebrating the birthday or the anniversary of the Convention of the Rights of the Child. I can think of no better company and no better reason than these guidelines and what they mean for Jamaica and for the Caribbean. As you all know, several years ago, the OCA increased its voice, joining others concerned with the treatment of children in the court system and the traumatic effects that that system can have on children, families, and communities. A groundbreaking study was undertaken by the OCA in 2009, which focused on the experiences of children in state care who appear before the courts, and it highlights the challenges that they face. There's copies of the study still available, and what impressed me most about it, aside from the content, was the size of it. It's like 25 pages, fully readable, and really useful to get a sense of what we're talking about here. In other words, the OCA has the evidence base to act upon, and that's where these guidelines come in. With the guidelines, the OCA has really raised its voice even louder. It's created a tool that can be used to improve the efficiency and the effectiveness of all professionals in the justice system and those in contact with the justice system to better protect the rights and address the needs of children, children who are victims, children who are witnesses, children and their families who are affected by court proceedings, legal system, and as the minister said, justice in general. These guidelines, the document which I think many of you have received upon entering here, are a really powerful tool. And again, I'm not just saying that because it's a document. The process, which you'll hear about more today, is as important, if not more important, than the document itself. Another caveat, I like the document a lot because it's like animated. I can understand what it's saying. It's not fluent in legalese. And again, the size. I can't keep my door open by putting it on the floor. It's not a door stopper. It's a practical tool that can fit in the back pocket of the briefcase and help all of us better adjust to how to better protect children. UNICEF is very proud to have accompanied this process, as has been noted, since the beginning. And we're pleased to see these guidelines and the process that they represent and the path that they map out to lead us forward. This good guidance, the materials that have been shared with you today, are an essential tool not only for everyone previously mentioned in the legal system and in the child protection networks, but really for all Jamaican communities. And again, the attractiveness of the document is, I don't care what other documents are in schools or ministries, this is a nice one. People will want to look at it, people will want to hold it, and children and young people will actually use it. I think in many experiences around the world, it's this type of guideline that not only empowers, but when kids read it, they're actually better informed than some of us who are supposed to be engaged in protecting them. So it's a real equalizer as a document. It puts the concepts, the terms, the approaches, and as it is, the good guidance in the hands of everyone. So UNICEF is not only just supporting the project because it has to do with children's issues and children's rights, but because this is really the tool that can make a major difference. In the context of the Convention of the Rights of the Child, which Jamaica fully respects, the Beijing rules concerning children's justice, and a whole set of international legal and domestic protocols which exist here. We really think, from a UNICEF perspective, that these codes of conduct and standards of practice for law enforcement, for detention facility staff, social workers, for all of us here in this room, these will really improve Jamaica's consistency in practicing what is preached in legalese, but more importantly, demonstrating that all communities from the bottom up can play a key role in protecting children's rights and addressing their needs. So that's basically why I'm standing here, but more importantly, UNICEF is here to really congratulate and commend Diane Gordon Harrison, the Office of the Children's Advocate, all of you who've been involved in these processes, for the production of this quick reference, user-friendly document that, no doubt about it, will in itself dispense some justice in the communities that are affected and by children and young people who want to see their rights truly respected and realized. We further commend the OCA's unrelenting efforts to protect the human rights of children who come in contact with the law, with the systems, and with mechanisms that on paper are there to protect them, but in practice we know there's still some gaps. So last but not least, we see these guidelines as a must-have tool, not only for Jamaica, but for all countries in the Caribbean, in order to help the wheels of justice move forward just another step in the best interest of the child. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much, Mr. Connolly, UNICEF representative for Jamaica. At this time, we are going to take greetings from Ms. Carol Palmer, Permanent Secretary in the Justice Ministry, representing Minister of Justice, Senator the Honorable Mark Golding, followed by Ms. Stacey Ann Joseph, Legal Officer, representing Dr. Fenton Ferguson, who is the Minister of Health.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Mrs. Diane Gordon Harrison, Children's Advocate and today's host, officials of state and of government, members of the diplomatic corps, specially invited guests, members of the media, ladies and gentlemen, and our children, good morning. I stand here representing the Minister of Justice, who is out on government business this week, representing our country at a forum on financing and to ensure we are on top of our corruption game in the Bahamas. We are particularly proud to be associated with this event and, more importantly, the document that has been produced, as we consider ourselves in the Ministry of Justice partners with the Office of the Children's Advocate. The Office of the Children's Advocate must be commended for the tremendous job it has been doing to fulfill its mandate of protecting and enforcing the rights of our children. The publishing of its child justice guidelines is the latest manifestation of that work, because indeed these guidelines will enhance the work of the Office of the Children's Advocate, as well as us in the other ministries, departments, and agencies of government. The Ministry of Justice is committed to supporting the activities of the Office of the Children's Advocate and will provide assistance in any way to abide by the principles of protecting the innocence of our children. There is no more appropriate day to launch such an instrument than today, Universal Children's Day. The United Nations Universal Children's Day, which was established in 1954, is celebrated on November 20 of each year to promote international togetherness and awareness among children worldwide, as well as a commitment to working together towards improving children's welfare. The OCA is a commission of Parliament, and it has statutory responsibilities to protect the rights and best interests of our children. Under the Child Care and Protection Act, under the statute, the Children's Advocate is authorized to issue guidance after consultation with such bodies and persons as deemed appropriate on best practices relating to any matter concerning the rights or best interests of children. It is under this rubric that the child justice guidelines are today being issued. The result is this handbook that standardizes the level of treatment that all players within the criminal justice system and even medical practitioners who examine child victims of crime should mete out to children. The guiding principles of the handbook are the UN Convention on the Rights of the Child and the Child Care and Protection Act here in Jamaica. The life of a child should be one of innocence, curiosity, and humility. However, in our flawed society, we find that children are faced with harsh situations that result in serious consequences, one of which is incarceration. The number of children who are placed in correctional facilities is increasing at a troubling rate, and measures must be put in place to facilitate their smooth rehabilitation. The Ministry of Justice is responding to this need, and various measures have already been implemented to address this concern. The Ministry is committed to the task of providing justice and protection for the nation's children through the Restorative Justice Unit, which also has responsibility for child justice matters, as most recently seen in our development of a draft national child diversion policy. The Office of the Children's Advocate was inextricably intertwined with us for this initiative, and we have taken on board the input we've gotten from our consultations, and I am sure that the policy as it will turn out will be better for having consulted, and we must say we also consulted with children. Additionally, in August, the Ministry, through its Legal Aid Council, took a decision to offer legal aid to children brought before the court as being uncontrollable. The Legal Aid Council has long provided legal representation for children under 18 years old who are charged with criminal offenses. There is ongoing collaboration between that council and the Office of the Children's Advocate. However, this was previously not extended to children who are brought before the court under the Child Care and Protection Act on the grounds that their parent or guardian is unable to control them and where no criminal offense was alleged. Let us all, as leaders, teachers, and caregivers, familiarize ourselves with these guidelines and other policy and legislative documents that relate to the care and protection of our children, such as the Child Care and Protection Act and the Convention on the Rights of the Child, so we can, one, teach our children about their rights. 2, hold ourselves and others to a higher standard of conduct. And 3, report cases where we see breaches of these standards. Let me take this opportunity on behalf of the Minister and the Ministry of Justice on a whole to congratulate you, Mrs. Gordon Harrison, and your team and your advisory panel of children for a job well done. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Mrs. Palmer. We now invite Ms. Stacy Ann Joseph, Legal Officer in the Ministry of Health, to come forward and bring greetings on behalf of the Health Minister, Dr. Fenton Ferguson. Please welcome her to the podium.
Thank you, Madam MC. Mrs. Diane Harrison, Children's Advocate. Mr. Justice Henderson Downer, Deputy Children's Advocate. Permanent Secretary in the Ministry of Justice. Contractor General, Mr. Harrison. Distinguished guests, good morning. Please accept apologies on behalf of the Honorable Minister of Health, Dr. Fenton Ferguson, whose absence is due to another engagement out of town. Notwithstanding the Minister's absence, it is my great pleasure to deliver his message in recognition of today's launch. The Minister's message reads thus: It is good that on a day such as Universal Children's Day, the Office of the Children's Advocate is choosing to launch a document that, in my estimation, could prove beneficial to the good and welfare of our children in Jamaica. The strength of a society's fabric bears a direct correlation to the way it treats the elderly and the young. These two groups, for reasons ranging from infirmity, lack of independence, and other vulnerabilities, represent important focal points in societal development. We ignore this indisputable fact at our peril. Universal Children's Day is more than just a day where we celebrate our children. It is a day when we take stock of how we relate to them and recommit ourselves to the ordained duty to caring and providing for them. It has always been true, but never more than now. We must hold to the maxim, it takes a village to raise a child. Now, in this global village we call the modern world, we must tenaciously hold on to those positive principles, guided by a sagacity born of historical understanding, as we take care of our children and shield them from the ravages of this world. I am heartened for the first time in the Caribbean and Latin Americas, we have sought to codify the boundaries and best practices necessary to negotiate the important task of ensuring justice for our children. I have no doubt that the efforts emanated from a deep-seated conviction that child justice does not only reside in our own four walls as parents, but must be present in our daily, professional, or personal interaction with our children. From the standpoint of the Ministry of Health, the OCA Child Justice Guidelines will become a sine qua non as we execute our task of caring for our children. Healthcare professionals will now have this material close at hand to give further guidance in dealing with young patients. Indeed, the health team is effectively saying the launch of OCA Child Justice Guidelines today has not come a moment too soon. I can only add to that. Give us guidance, OCA. Give us guidance as we do our duty to take care of our children. Thank you. Honorable Dr. Fenton Ferguson.
Thank you very much, Ms. Joseph. At this time, we would like to extend apologies for Mr. Andrew Holness, Leader of the Opposition, who wanted to be here, but because of circumstances to which he must attend right now, he has extended his apologies, but gives his full support and commitment to our child justice guidelines. If you look on your programs, you'll see that we have some entertainment. We have entertainment from a group of very talented children. This year, they won the junior instrumental category of the 17th Annual World Championships of Performing Arts, also called the Talent Olympics in Hollywood, California. Ladies and gentlemen, these children will astound you. They are exceptionally talented. Please give a warm welcome to the Arden Preparatory Drummers.
intimidated. A little girl who was 8 years old was allegedly raped by a man who has a stall near to my school. I was in her class, and we used to walk home together. I was with her on the day when he pulled her away into nearby bushes. I saw him do this, and then I ran away. I wanted to help and became a witness. I was so surprised on the day I went to court because my friend and I had to sit on a bench to wait for a long time for our turn in court. When the judge was ready for us, a policeman came outside and shouted our names 3 times. What made it worse is that I found out afterwards that we had been sitting on the same bench with the accused man's mother and cousin. I felt intimidated and afraid. The OCA's Child Justice Guidelines state that court scheduling must be done in a way that allows cases involving children to be called up early. The guidelines also say that more sensitivity must be taken when calling children into court and in relation to where they wait before going inside. Thank you.
Inability to participate. They claimed that my cousin was uncontrollable and she was taken to the court without a legal representation. I wanted to know what happened, and so after she was given a correctional order, I went to visit her. She says that while in court, she had not been given any opportunity to express her views, and the next thing she knew, she was being carted out to a juvenile correctional facility. OCA's Child Justice Guidelines says that this is a no-no, as the child has the right to participate in the process once he or she is able to do so, because his or her views must be taken into account before any decision which affects him or her is made. It also says that the child's right to legal representation must be observed and protected. Thank you.
Good morning. Fear and nervousness. I had never been to court before. One night, I saw my mother watching NCIS and Criminal Minds on television. They had seen some courtroom, but this was cable television, so I wasn't sure if it would be the same in Jamaica. I have a friend who went to court before. She was 7 years old, and the hardest part for her was that she was fearful and nervous because she just did not know what to expect. She was not prepared and was traumatized by the appearance in court. I feared that the same thing may happen to me, but I learned of the OCA's Child Justice Guidelines, which say that court rotation is a necessity for all children before they go to court. Thank you.
Good morning. Confinement. My younger brother was accused of stealing a loaf of bread from a supermarket when he was 12 years old. He was arrested by the police, but because the children's court was not being held in the parish for another 4 days, he was kept in custody. He was not brought to no court, and no one at the police station wanted to discuss the issue of bail. The OCA's Child Justice Guidelines provide guidance about 2 options that will have helped my brother in this situation. 1, station bail could have been offered to my brother by the police even before any court date. 2nd, they could have taken my brother before any resident magistrate in the parish at any time. They did not have to wait on children's court. Thank you.
Good morning, everybody. Abandoned and confused. A child from my community got in trouble with the law. My mother sent me to the shop to buy something, and I saw this boy's mother talking to the shopkeeper. She said that from the police took her son, she's been trying to find out where he's being kept, if or when he will be taken to court, but nobody giving her any information. She doesn't know if he's okay, if he's scared or hungry. She's worried sick. She's sure that he must feel abandoned by his family and confused. According to the OCA's Child Justice Guideline, family notification is very important. And I say again, very important. Parent or responsible family member must be contacted as soon as possible. and given relevant information about the child's location, needs, and status. Thank you.
Morning, everyone. Do they care? My mother's youngest sister is 14 years old. She lives with me and she's more like a sister to me than an aunt. She was sexually assaulted by her neighbor and we made a report to the police. They started investigating and she was examined by a doctor. The medical certificate supported my aunt's allegations that she had been molested. The OCA's Child Justice Guidelines outlines the role of the doctor and highlights the fact that in a criminal trial, if a doctor's medical opinion is to be heard by the court, he or she must be there to give evidence. What's written on paper is just not enough.
Thanks to the Children's Advisory Panel a while ago. What you just heard from them are the voices of the children of Jamaica. So many of them, the sentiments being echoed, and it is for that reason we continue to reiterate the importance of these child justice guidelines. At this time, we want to give you the overview, just what are contained in these guidelines and how effective and how much of an impact will it make on our society. Please welcome to the podium at this time Children's Advocate of Jamaica, Mrs. Diane Gordon Harrison.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Permanent Secretary in the Ministry of Justice, Mrs. Carol Palmer, representing the Minister of Justice, Senator the Honorable Mark Golding. Legal Officer in the Ministry of Health, Ms. Stacey Ann Joseph, representing Minister of Health, the Honorable Dr. Fenton Ferguson. Members of the Diplomatic Corps, Family Court Judge, Her Honor Mrs. Paula Blake Powell, Permanent Secretaries, other distinguished ladies and gentlemen, to include the Contractor General, Mr. Dirk Harrison, Commissioner of Corrections, Ms. Javine Bent, Custos of St. Andrew, the Honorable Marigold Harding, Custos of Kingston, the Honorable Stedman Fuller, heads of agencies, ladies and gentlemen, boys and girls, distinguished colleagues all, good morning. It is with a sense of excitement, it has been with me since morning, commingled with hopefulness, that I add my voice to the welcome that has already been extended to you. Of course, it goes without saying that we at the Office of the Children's Advocate are tremendously pleased to be hosting all of you this morning. In fact, we are overjoyed on the occasion of the launch of the OCA's Child Justice Guidelines. This document is not only important because of the significant role that it will play in the transformation that our justice system must continue to experience, but also because it effectively represents a compendium of best practices that are conveniently and attractively, according to Mr. Connolly, presented in a very practical handbook. It truly is a resource handbook that should be kept close to hand by the varied and many stakeholders who have to play any type of role within the justice system. As you will see throughout this overview, it targets every single player that does or could interact with or relate to children who have to interface with the justice sector. It provides very specific guidance to each stakeholder as to the manner in which they should discharge their functions when dealing with a child in any capacity, and it equips them with objective measures for meeting the needs of children who come into contact with the judicial process. So just what does the Children's Advocate have to do with this process? And how does the issuance of these guidelines even fall within the purview of this office? The Children's Advocate, and by extension the office, is a commission of the Jamaican Parliament and is charged with the legislative mandate of protecting the rights and best interests of all children in Jamaica, whether they are born here or not, whether they in fact live here or are merely visiting on vacation or not. This responsibility is a very awesome one, but one which we embrace because we recognize how important it is and how relevant it is to effective nation building and development. We at the Office of the Children's Advocate are mindful of the fact that due to the existence of a number of child protection agencies within the government sector, oftentimes there is much confusion as to what each entity does and how they do it. As such, I'm sure that you will pardon me, as I could not resist this opportunity to distinguish some of the functions of these very many agencies. While there may be collaboration among the entities at various times, there are very distinct roles that each player has to fulfill. Some of the differentiating factors about the Office of the Children's Advocate include the fact that while we are a part of the child protection sector, we are also the regulators of that sector, as it is the Office of the Children's Advocate which has the responsibility to monitor, inquire into, to investigate, and where appropriate, institute legal proceedings against any government entity and government representative, as well as private players, who has infringed the right of a child. This responsibility to move against any representative or any person ranges from the most junior of persons to the most senior. Another differentiating factor is that we do not fall within a ministry of government, which means in practical terms that we do not in fact report to a permanent secretary or to a minister of government. As a parliamentary commission, we report directly to the Parliament. This is critical and most significant and must be emphasized as it ensures the integrity and transparency of the process and the accountability of the system. When there are instances, for example, in which the OCA has to move against any government entity, there must be confidence in the fairness of the process. The government of Jamaica recognizes the importance of this factor and has made this evident through its appointment of a children's advocate who is to serve as the de facto guardian of the system based on the nature of the functions that Parliament has ascribed to this office. The OCA seeks to discharge its statutory mandate in a number of ways. With specific reference to these guidelines, paragraph 11, subparagraph 2 of the first schedule to the Child Care and Protection Act stipulates that the Children's Advocate may, after consultation with such bodies and persons as she thinks appropriate, you notice I've substituted he for she, as she thinks appropriate, issue guidance on best practice in relation to any matter concerning the rights or best interests of children. It is on this authority that the Office of the Children's Advocate has issued the Child Justice Guidelines. Over time, the office has become aware of reports concerning the negative experiences that children have in court or in the lead-up to court proceedings, starting from the investigative stage with the police through to the actual court appearance, and where applicable, their experiences within the facilities in which they are institutionalized, both during and after the proceedings. Many children who have gone through the system recount feelings of fear, trauma, uncertainty, and re-victimization by the system. While it is true that some of them had moments in which they felt that they were being treated appropriately, this would always be punctuated with comments like, "One policeman was very nice," or "The nice judge lady was good to me last week." It is comments like these, however, which underscored the inconsistency in the treatment of our children by players throughout the system, and the urgent need for the establishment of minimum standards that would serve to level the playing field and promote quality service delivery to all children who are served by the justice sector. The experiences and accompanying emotions that the members of the Children's Advisory Panel of the OCA adverted to a short while ago in their various presentations are not ones that are foreign to us. In fact, they are quite real. We have heard firsthand about the inability of children to understand what would happen to them next because nobody took the time to explain the process. We have dealt with mothers who are desperate to find where their children are being kept and when and if they would in fact be brought to court because they had been transferred to another institution without their knowledge and the feelings of abandonment that these children experience as a result of this. We at the OCA have found ourselves encouraging child victims of crime, as well as their parents, about the need to bear with the system just a little bit longer when they became frustrated that yet again they have to be given another court date because their matter is being put off. Despite these occurrences, however, ladies and gentlemen, our view at the OCA is that in a number of cases, it is not that persons within the system set out to deliberately hurt children in these ways, but inevitably end up doing so because of a lack of awareness of how it is they properly ought to treat with children and of the associated consequential effects upon children who are exposed to their actions. This realization served as the primary catalyst for the preparation and the issuance of these guidelines. As I've said on previous occasions, our justice system as it now exists is predominantly geared towards providing services for adults and is therefore quite a difficult and intimidating place for children who must endure it in whatever capacity. There is a great need for appropriate adjustments to be made to the various processes which would enable children to be adequately accommodated in light of their varying needs and developmental vulnerabilities. The Office of the Children's Advocate, however, is quite happy and encouraged by the participation in the very consultative process that led to these guidelines, which came from ministries, departments, and various agencies of government, as well as NGO groups, psychologists, both private and public, and psychiatrists, and a number of other professionals. They gave of their time, of their ideas, and of their expertise. Of course, I must single out UNICEF Jamaica. We are greatly appreciative to UNICEF Jamaica for its unwavering support throughout this entire process. UNICEF remained committed to the cause, and once again, as it does time and time again, exhibited the strength of its conviction by putting its money where its mouth is. And UNICEF contributed unselfishly, unquestioningly. Mr. Connolly is here as the UNICEF country head, but I have to say, Mrs. Janet Cupidon Quayler, who is the child protection specialist within UNICEF, was quite a source of inspiration and encouragement. And that inspiration, that support that UNICEF gave to us, contributed in a very significant way in making these guidelines a reality. Now, ladies and gentlemen, I am aware that there have been some murmurings, and some may question why the Office of the Children's Advocate went this route. But I categorically say to them that the Office of the Children's Advocate is in no way deterred by the criticism that may come from some quarters or from those individuals who may say that the guidelines are of no moment because they have no sanctions. Believe me, we have heard that already. We, however, are firmly of the view that it takes varying strategies and different approaches to sometimes achieve a desired result. The Office of the Children's Advocate's resolve to relentlessly pursue known instances in which children are inappropriately treated and to take the required steps when necessary remains intact, and I assure you of that. But it is our considered view that there also must be an emphasis on the need to build the capacities of persons within the sector, to sensitize them to the relevant and necessary child-friendly and child-appropriate responses, and to empower them with knowledge so that over time and with persistence, we can change the culture, shift the paradigms, and impact the system positively. Declaratory judgments of the court don't have sanctions, nor do practice directions issued by the Chief Justice, but they do provide invaluable guidance and lend clarity to critical matters. The Child Justice Guidelines ought properly to be viewed in this very same light. You will permit me, of course, as this is the launch of these guidelines, to make some very specific references to certain key aspects of the documents. The foundation of the document, really, is grounded in the recognition that children must be treated with dignity and with particular care because they have special needs, and the period of childhood is automatically and naturally a particularly vulnerable time in everybody's development. We've all been there. The second issue that I wish to highlight about the guidelines is that they have been informed by both local and international instruments, which are guided by the principle that all decisions and systems that exist must be adopted and implemented to advance the best interests of the child. Some international instruments include the United Nations Convention on the Rights of the Child, which the birthday is today, November 20, the United Nations Standard Minimum Rules for the Administration of Juvenile Justice, and guidelines on justice in matters involving child victims and witnesses of crime. Locally, the document is guided by the Child Care and Protection Act and the Bail Act. The categories of children that the guidelines deal with include the child in conflict with the law. What happens to this child at the investigative stage, pre-charge stage, after arrest, and throughout the court proceedings? The child as a victim of crime, the need for counseling support and intervention, the explanation of the court process, and a general sensitization. The child who is a witness in a court proceeding. It also includes references to the child who is brought before the court on a complaint that he or she is uncontrollable or is in need of care and protection. So just who are the stakeholders that these guidelines target? The police, the prosecutors at all levels, both within the Resident Magistrates Court and within the Office of the Director of Public Prosecutions, Defense Counsel, victim support personnel, operators of child care institutions to include the CDA, who may have children who are involved with the justice system and who have therefore to stand in the shoes of the parents to ensure that these children are exposed appropriately to the court process. Resident magistrates and judges. It also targets medical practitioners and correctional officers. A few of the salient guidelines, there are many, but in the interest of time, I've only picked out a few to give you an idea and to give you really a feel of the document and to whet your appetites so that you can, in fact, read the document when you leave here today. The guidelines deal with court orientation. Within the present justice system, it is more probable that children who feature as victims of crime are the ones that will benefit from court orientation under the aegis of the Victim Support Unit. Guideline 23, however, which is to be found on page 20 of the document, has effectively expanded this preparation for court to all categories of children, including those who are in conflict with the law. This guideline places the orientation of the child accused in the hands of defense counsel, who appears for that child, and provides that defense counsel should give a minimum of 2 sessions prior to the child's first court appearance, and another, of course, before the trial or any other major hearing in the matter. The child's parents or guardians should be included in these sessions, and they should be so detailed and ought to include a court visit, explanation of the roles and functions of all the players who will be present in court at the time of trial, and also a complete explanation of the actual process as it will unfold in child and age-friendly language. the child should be allowed to ask clarifying questions, and of course, these answers should be given. The guidelines also treat with arrest and family notification. There is extreme absence of uniformity in the system in this regard at present. Guideline 11 on page 13 stipulates that upon the arrest of a child, the child's parents or guardians should be immediately notified by the police. Sufficient detail concerning the child's whereabouts, the child's condition, and any particular special needs that the child may have should be communicated so that when the parent goes to visit the child, they can be appropriately equipped to treat with whatever situation the child needs assistance with. The guidelines also speak to the right of children to legal representation. There is currently the pervasive view that children who are held on suspicion of having committed an offense may be interviewed in the presence of their parents, and that there is no absolute need for counsel to be present. This is especially problematic when the offense is a serious one and could compromise the child's ability to be protected from self-incrimination. And I need not say, ladies and gentlemen, you have heard the news. The sad fact is that increasingly we have children who are featuring as perpetrators of crime, and so we believe that due process should be afforded, and if adults who are committing the same serious crimes are afforded legal representation, what do we say of children who are even more vulnerable? Parents are good, but some parents do not have the sophistication in law to provide that legal protection that the child may need, and so we think that this is extremely important. Guideline 15 on page 14 makes it abundantly clear that this practice of not affording legal counsel is not in conformity with what redounds to the child's best interest, and that the child's right to legal representation is to be paramount. The guidelines also speak to criminal case management principles. Guideline 26 in paragraphs 1 and 2 on page 24 cite the need for judges and magistrates to apply criminal case management principles in the handling of all matters in which children are involved, in whatever capacity. Attention should be paid to dates that are least disruptive to the child's attendance in school where possible. Let us utilize the summer vacations. Let us utilize times after school. And as I speak about criminal case management, let me pause to acknowledge the arrival of the Director of Public Prosecutions, Ms. Paula Llewellyn, who had tendered her apologies for being late. Welcome, Director. We maintain that attention should be paid to dates that are least disruptive to the child's attendance in school, because the overall aim is to reduce the frustration and hardship that the child may feel because of the length of the process and the inability to have the matter dispensed with within good time. Another guideline speaks about the absence of the child defendant. This is perhaps one of the most revolutionary guidelines, and it highlights the need for us to be adaptive to change and to do things differently if we want different results. Guideline 26 in paragraph 7 on page 26 recommends to judges that they are to consider, where appropriate, giving the child defendant the option of not attending sittings of court which are purely administrative, so long as suitable arrangements can be made to secure the attendance of the child at subsequent sittings. While some latitude is presently given to child witnesses by some judges, this practice is not extended in any situation that I know of to child defendants. The Chief Justice, I must say, was fully on board with this one, and we look forward to having further dialogue on this issue. These few guidelines that I have adverted to are but a mere sampling of the comprehensive standards that this resource handbook has established. I implore you that when you leave here today, you read the guidelines and become familiar with them, because this is not the last that you will hear of them. Colleagues all, it is no coincidence that this event is being held on Universal Children's Day, and incidentally, since 2008, the World Day of Prayer and Action for Children. As I close, I must confess that this was quite deliberate, and I seize this opportunity to appeal to all of you in this room, as you are the movers and shakers of society. It is not by mistake that you have been invited. You were all deliberately selected, because we at the Office of the Children's Advocate regard you as part of the possibility team in whom we have every confidence. We know that you will answer this call to action. Together, we can impact the system for good through our concentrated efforts, through our dedication to protect the strength and the integrity of Jamaica's institutional systems, and with a united resolve that we will not simply continue to revel in highlighting the negatives that exist and lament the need for improvement. The time is now. This is our opportunity to join hands and be a part of the rebuilding process. This is the overarching objective of the OCA's Child Justice Guidelines, and I wholeheartedly commend them to you as we pledge to do right by our children, not simply because we have subscribed to international conventions and protocols, but because our children deserve it, and simply put, we owe it to them. Let us build each other up as we strive for excellence, and together we join the OCA's progress train. I thank you. The work and the support that we continue to receive from our partner UNICEF, it is insurmountable, and we are always grateful, and we are always committed to partnering with you. At this time, I'm going to invite Mr. Connolly to come to the front of the head table. Just stand here. And I'm also going to ask our Senior Legal and Policy Officer, Ms. Nicole Wright, to come forward so that we can make a presentation to UNICEF. On behalf of all of us, we are grateful for the partnership that we continue to have with you. Nicole?
Good morning, one and all. On behalf of the Children's Advocate, Mrs. Diane Gordon Harrison, Deputy Children's Advocate, Mr. Justice Henderson Downer, retired, and all of the other members of staff at the Office of the Children's Advocate, I would like to thank UNICEF for the invaluable contribution that they have made in assisting our office with the development of the OCA Child's Justice Guidelines. Kindly accept this token as a sign of our appreciation for your support, and we look forward to working with you on future projects that will further uphold the rights and best interests of children in Jamaica.
I'll carry this for Janet and the UNICEF team. And we'll have to find a new wall in our office. It's so big. Thank you.
Ladies and gentlemen, we have come to the end of our program, and at this time we're going to ask our another Senior Legal and Policy Officer, Ms. Sharon Hansen, to come forward and give the vote of thanks.
Mrs. Diane Gordon Harrison, Children's Advocate and host of this morning's event, members of the head table, representatives from the various government ministries, agencies and departments, members of the diplomatic corps, children, members of the media, other distinguished guests, ladies and gentlemen, good morning. Well,
we are drawing close of what I am sure you will agree has been a very informative and entertaining morning. Getting to this point in the program and to this stage of the development of the guidelines has involved the commitment, collaboration, cooperation, and goodwill of numerous individuals and organizations. Indeed, the entire experience has been a labor of love. Mine is the unenviable task of thanking those who made contributions to the development of these child justice guidelines and the launch today. The fact that certain names may not be mentioned here this morning in no way diminishes our gratitude for their contributions. Having said that, let me begin by conveying sincere thanks and appreciation to UNICEF. We are indeed indebted to you for your support of these guidelines, and most importantly, your commitment to the children of Jamaica, and for your invaluable presence and contribution to this morning's proceedings. To Mr. Connolly, thank you for your kind words and for seeing these guidelines as a must-have tool. Our thanks goes also to the many persons who accepted the Children's Advocate's invitation to be here and who also brought greetings at this morning's proceedings. The Honorable Mr. Peter Bunting, Minister of National Security, who was unable to stay with us for the entire proceedings. We thank him for attending and bringing greetings at the last minute. To the Ministry of Justice, who is represented this morning by the Permanent Secretary, Mrs. Carol Palmer, who brought greetings on behalf of the Senator, the Honorable Mr. Mark Golding, the Minister of Justice. Also to the Ministry of Health, Ms. Stacey Ann Joseph, who represented the Honorable Dr. Fenton Ferguson, Minister of Health. Although not physically present, we thank the Honorable Justice Zayla McCallow, Chief Justice of Jamaica, for sending greetings, and we thank Mr. Justice Henderson Downer for delivering her message with the same passion and conviction that we know the Chief Justice would have. Thank you, sir. Thank you to the following stakeholders, departments, agencies, and individuals for their invaluable contribution to the development of these guidelines. Once again, to the Chief Justice of Jamaica, the Ministry of Youth and Culture, the Office of the Director of Public Prosecutions, the Department of Correctional Services, the Office of the Children's Registry, the Child Development Agency, the Victim Support Unit, the Center for the Investigation of Sexual Offenses and Child Abuse, CISOCA, Dr. Clayton Sewell, forensic psychiatrist and president of the Jamaica Psychiatric Association, Dr. Wendell Abel, head of psychiatry, University Hospital of the West Indies, resident magistrates of the Family and Children's Courts, Her Honor Mrs. Paula Blake Powell, His Honor Mr. Charles Pennycook, members of the Jamaican Bar, Mrs. Arlene Harrison Henry and Mr. Vincent Wellesley, Hear the Children's Cry, Jamaicans for Justice, the Jamaica Civil Society, and as well as the Child Guidelines Steering Committee. Thank you to all those who made today's launch a success. Ms. Nicole Hales, Public Education and Special Projects Manager, who has worked tirelessly at organizing and coordinating the activities for today's launch. Good job. Thank you to the Reverend Dr. George Mulrain for his prayer and blessings on today's proceedings. Ms. Melissa Walker and other members of the OCA's Child Advisory Panel, thank you for your participation. Today really is about you and your peers, and we hope that these guidelines will make your childhood experiences that much better. We would like to use this opportunity to let you know that your voices matter. To the ardent preparatory drummers,
The OCA by no means supports non-attendance at classes unless for exceptional reasons, and today is a very good reason for doing so. The launch would not have been the same without your lively and spirited performance. I enjoyed those items, and I'm certain that I speak for all. Thank you so much for entertaining us with your wisdom. Great appreciation is expressed to members of staff of the Office of the Children's Advocate who willingly assisted in today's launch, and without whose support, the proceedings would not have been the same. Many of our staff members are not here with us today. As usual, the business of the children, protecting the children of Jamaica, it never ends, and as such, they are currently holding the fort. However, they are here in spirit, and we thank them for their unending support. Special thanks goes out to Mr. Kemar Laws, our IT manager, who gave of his time and effort every step of the way. Sincere thanks to the Terra Nova Hotel and its staff for providing us with these pleasant surroundings. Heartfelt appreciation and thanks goes to the project consultant, Mr. Clyde Williams, and his project team. When approached about this project, Mr. Williams readily embraced it. Your professionalism, commitment, and insight gave way to these guidelines, which we so proudly launched today. We are very much indebted to those who may not be here this morning, but who have made significant contributions through the provision of very useful comments on different versions of the draft. And indeed, there were many versions before we got to the final stage. Thanks also to the team at Express Litho Limited, for the creative cover design and illustrations which brought the guidelines to life. A special thank you to members of the press and the photography and videography team for your presence. And lastly, but by no means least, I wish to convey heartfelt appreciation and gratitude to our dear children's advocate, Mrs. Gordon Harrison. I can recall at one of our steering committee meetings, Mrs. Harrison, pregnant with enthusiasm and excitement about the final stages of the development of the guidelines, referred to it as anticipating the birth of a newborn. Her determination, vision, insight, eye for detail, and encouragement throughout the process has certainly contributed to the successful publication of these guidelines. Mrs. Harrison, I sincerely doubt that we could have completed this without your guidance and direction. Your passion and commitment to the children of Jamaica continue to inspire us at the Office of the Children's Advocate. Many thanks to you. Ladies and gentlemen, once again, thank you all for coming, and happy Universal Children's Day. Thank you.